Originally, when I did my video on the Shimano wireless group set being launched, I did a bit more digging around and I saw that SRAM, which has historically filed around this time, at least the last couple of years, for group set things, also had filings. It was also, I noticed in a comment on cycling tips that, yeah, SRAM is also launching new stuff. So I went through it and I saw some stuff that was kind of interesting, but by now a couple of people have reported on what those things are. Primarily the one that most people have reported on is that SRAM Axis wireless stuff is now coming to the rival level. At least that's what we can kind of tell by the shifter filings that indicate that they are rival shifters. Now, don't know, this is pure speculation, but it's probably going to be kind of targeting a gravelly group set in mind, or it may just actually be trying to flesh out that full entire group set range in order to kind of capture more of the market. SRAM is basically, up until the launch of their electronic group sets, had been very quickly losing the OE market, which is your primary sales channel for group sets now. And while they had made some inroads with their 10-speed group sets because they were so light, Shimano's performance quickly outshadowed them, and Shimano's grunt for pricing kind of outshadowed them. So kind of left with mechanical SRAM in the road segment kind of being pushed out. Now, just like Shimano, what we're looking at is very simply, you spend all this money to develop, especially the electromechanical bits, you want to recoup that investment. And for Shimano, the top two, the one that most people will buy, and then the Halo group set, I mean, they are absolutely identical inside from an electronic and electromechanical perspective. There is changes on the exterior, and they can actually affect mechanical performance. But what you really see is very little, very unmeaningful changes. Things like the extra mass means there's a little bit loss of battery life, a little bit slower performance. But these are things that are so small they're imperceivable to anyone. SRAM, on the other hand, has been making really good inroad with Axis in the OE market now. The wireless innovation is sort of catching on because, if a company can save a buck by not having to spend time routing cables internally, they're probably going to want to do that. For a bike, very few bike shops actually assemble bikes in that manner anymore. It's all done in factories, generally in Taiwan and China. So for SRAM to try and make further inroads and recoup all that developmental cost, it makes sense for them to kind of add that next tier down. I mean, their margins are probably going to be razor thin, but market penetration and market recognition and market choice are very expensive things. One of the things that I've been learning as I try and launch and develop my own products and work with other companies to develop and launch products, marketing is exceedingly expensive. So by expanding that range, they'll probably have more ability to ship volume and get those prices down. So most people reported on the whole rival Axis is coming. Great. No one really touched on the shocks. But the thing that intrigued me was the pedal sensor. And I immediately wrote this off as, they're updating and replacing the PowerTap P2 pedals. SRAM bought PowerTap, and Quark has been developing the next generations of those technologies, trying to fill out, like they had a crank, now they have a wheel and they have a pedal. Okay, but there are some flaws in those pieces of technologies. So, less so the wheel, but the pedal, I personally have had issues with all the PowerTap pedals I've ever tried. I can't get them to read right. It doesn't matter anything about them. It doesn't matter batteries. It doesn't matter swap out. Oh, that one was defective. They've all kind of read. They're in the 2%, but they bounce around. And it has to do with how I pedal and how they measure position. So I figured, they're just going to update that. So then I saw on DC Rainmaker's website today, all right, they're killing stuff. Well, that's pretty obvious that, if you want to release a new product, you're going to kill the old one. You're going to stop making it unless there's some reason. But the pedal sensor that is listed has Bluetooth and an area. Area, A-I-R-E-A, I believe. That's the one that they use for their shifting communication system on Axis, and also for their dropper post. While the dropper post does support ANT controls and plus, it also supports area. And the new shocks, they support area. Okay. Why does a pedaling sensor need to support area? So in my previous job, one of the strong requirements I had to deal with was reviewing external companies' patents. Essentially knowing and understanding patents and how to get around them. So I got very good at reading and understanding patents. So if this pedal sensor, from the FCC labeling position, I can't figure out what it is. It could be a torque tube sensor, but just doesn't ring true. So put on my patent cap and went off to search for SRAM patents. Well, I did find something, and it's not what I expected. So without further ado, let's talk about a pedaling sensor for mountain bike suspension. So back about a week and a half ago, SRAM filed these things here. And as you can see, it's been a while since they've filed anything, but they do tend to file. This last year they filed around this time, and this was the integrated zip VUCA shifting system, tri-bars. So what do we got new? Standard fare, a bicycle power meter, we'll get to that. Front suspension, BLE, area, and ANT. Okay, that, might not be that big a deal, but it's basically semi-active suspension. Rear shock, again, same thing, same technology, kind of falling into line with what we've seen from things like Pinarello and previously the Cannondale-Simon system. Yeah, so if you're unfamiliar with Cannondale-Simon, it was electronically controlled semi-active suspension, adjusting valves and stuff. Really, really cool stuff. Yeah, and it never kind of made it out. I mean, it was a little ahead of its time, but yeah. So left shifter, right shifter, these were the things that most companies reported on, because if you look at the IC labeling or the labeling, you will see artwork with the right rival certification, and the other one will say left rival. So, yep, that's a shifter. That's a hydraulic shifter, because you can see from where the hydraulic system would fit in. So, pretty obvious that they're going into rival, which is, good news for trying to drive down the price of the electronic group sets. The shocks. So I think this is neat because we actually know this one is the Deluxe. Yeah, so this one's being branded Super Deluxe Ultimate, but there was another name, Debonair. So Super Deluxe Ultimate Debonair is what this is being called, and it's likely got its electronics packed away somewhere in the top bit, probably electronic valving here. You don't readily see any charge ports on it, but I mean, this may just be a reference shock that they put up in order to just kind of explain where the labeling goes. Now, the other thing is, this may not be semi-active. It could actually just be using their ShockWiz technology, having it built into the shock to tell you how to tune it, which would drastically lower the cost. Same thing with the front suspension. So RockShox Pike, Ultimate, Centerline, labels here. Great, no big deal. Now, I'm just going to deal with this a little later, because after looking at it, I have no idea exactly what it is. But this is the pedal sensor. And again, labeling location explains what it is. So we've got a little tube, bolt here, and when you tighten it, these fins will push out. So this goes into the center of a crankset. Got probably an LED indicator and not much else we can tell. So it says it's a pedal sensor. The previous one, this is a power meter. What the heck is a pedal sensor? So I started going through SRAM's patents by date. So there's two ways you can kind of reference patents when you're actually talking about development. Things that are long-term developments, you'll see things like derailleurs multiple times as they fix and tweak and come up with new ideas if things aren't working, and you'll see a chain of them before a product is released. And sometimes you will see something kind of fairly quick. So this was actually filed 2019-03. So this is basically 2 years old. So 2 years ago that they were basically working on this. The pedal activity sensor and methods of pedaling analysis. Oh, what's that? Well, if you read this here, it basically says basic cadence sensors suck, magnets, positioning, blah, blah, blah. And then while, you could increase the frequency of reporting, because currently cadence sensors only report once per revolution, further complications of magnet systems. So at the same time, many modern mountain bikes are equipped with suspension in order to provide a more comfortable, less jarring ride on uneven terrain. Sophisticated mountain bicycles also may include some sort of controls to refine the dampening effects. So what they're saying is, as you pedal, knowing what your feet are doing and where they are may impact your suspension. So this further goes on to explain that. Primary claim being how housings, retaining members, so some of that sensor configured to be disposed within the housing, the sensor configured to detect angular velocity, a gyro, and or position of the crank. So that can be done through Kalman filtering with accelerometer, a combination of accelerometer and gyro, or it can kind of just be done in some crude ways of looking for zero cross on the accelerometer and then compensating with gyros. So both fairly common, well-known ideas. I need to get rid of that. But it doesn't really talk too much about the application. It just talks about what the invention is. So it knows position. Well, that kind of gives us a clue on why, not that one. Why does this have area? Well, as near as I can figure then, they're going to figure out that, yeah, if you're not pedaling and you're going down a hill, that the suspension tuning may be different than what you would have if you were pedaling while going down a hill. Similarly, if, kind of abrupt start stops, it may adjust the suspension tune stiffer in the rear or something like that. So what we're seeing here is this is a high accuracy cadence and angle sensor that feeds into their suspension system. So, I mean, that's pretty kind of cool and innovative, and definitely goes with the direction of the technology they acquired Shockwiz a few years ago. But this is the Dub Power Meter B2. Now, this is interesting because this doesn't look like anything we've ever seen before. So this is not a spider. This is not a, this is the label. This is the label affixed, 1.3 millimeters, 6 millimeters. So the whole thing is only 13 millimeters wide. It's referred to as power meter sled cover. So, I mean, this could be a connector. This could be an LED or a button of some sort. So this could just be like a charging module that is inserted. So, the quick, which would probably make sense. I mean, the FCC labeling then doesn't impede the exterior aesthetics at all. it's fairly small. It's about the diameter of an axle, but it doesn't show any threading. So, I mean, this could be a simplified representation of it. And you can see that this piece not found here. So it's not just artwork, it is part of the device. It also uses area, which is very, very kind of confusing in my mind. But given what we just learned through this patent, it's probably likely that they might incorporate this into the new dub PM. So a P2 replacement, or it could be dub power meter battery 2. I mean, they tend to use the B2s on revisions of things. So this may just be a rechargeable version, and they might have had to bring that in because if they want to run high positional stuff, they might need more battery capacity than a CR2032. So that's, in my opinion, really kind of cool. Basically what we're seeing now is the evolution of things that we saw 15 years ago. Things like the Cannondale-Simon system, or even like active suspension, things that really never came to the fruition in things like the mass consumer market. There is some semi-active suspension available on Cadillacs and Audis that use magnetorheological damper systems, essentially magnetic coils that adjust the fluid viscosity. Another way of just making variable damping. So what we've seen here is that they're actually taking many pieces of sensor information, and it's easily conceivable that what SRAM has done is to take their ShockWiz technology, and ShockWiz basically is a pressure sensor, and they, knowing how it compresses over a certain travel range, they linearize that position, and then they use positional data, which then they can derive velocity and acceleration data to tell you how to tune your suspension in combination with other factors. So I suspect that they would take that technology, build it into the shocks, linear sensors, or build in the pressure sensors. Very easy to do because they own RockShox. But now they're taking it a step further, and usually advanced suspension control systems can kind of get unstable. So I suspect it's going to be more like it figuring out, are you pedaling, are you not pedaling, and how are your pedals positioned? Because if you're going downhill and pedaling, you might want to firm up that suspension so that you have some more ability to control the front end of the bike and put down power when you need it. But if you stop, you might want a softer suspension to deal with jumps and landings. So then it would loosen your suspension, it would decrease the compression and the rebound. So I suspect that's more in terms with what SRAM will be launching with the Debonair. And it's probably going to, with the FCC lifts, 6 months, we're going to see it in time for the summertime. So those who want kind of the next generation mountain bike electronic experience, what's really interesting is to talk to most of the local bike shops. Di2 in the mountain bike scene was basically a failure, at least according to the local shops here in Alberta. I think one of the shops said they only sold one, and it was literally to Garmin for the Ant Plus stuff. So it was really kind of interesting to see that there's basically very low Shimano market penetration. And we saw that with their updated groups that didn't include an update to the Di2 system. So it's basically left stagnant. So either SRAM is making a big push into an area that may not be responsive to electronic shifting, or maybe it needs something more than just electronic shifting. Maybe this is really in tune, considering there is a dub power meter, but maybe it has very little to do with the road group set. Maybe that's more targeting just an update. And that's why they want a specific pedal sensor, because they're not running power meters in the mountain bike scene, and they're not running electronic group sets as much. They do have their electronic group set, but volumes are probably low, especially given the XTR and XT Di2 low sales, at least what I've been able to figure locally. I could be entirely wrong. So Yeah, another 6 month surprise coming up for us there. Also, I've got a 1 to 2 weeks out from my launch, so stay tuned for that. Coming soon. I mean, if you want to get in on possibly having a deal, use the Maelstrom email sign up, the pre-order link. You'll be pleasantly surprised in a few weeks when you do. With that, take it easy and enjoy cycling.